This is Tekken. This is not. Have you ever picked up a fighting game, chosen your character based on the way they look or how cool they are, and immediately faced an opponent that uses just all kinds of random bullshit you couldn't have expected? That's fine if the game you're playing is fundamentally unrealistic, but in a game that has its characters and their entire concepts based on real-world martial arts, this could be somewhat disconcerting. Fighting games are really old in terms of video game longevity. 2D ones have been with us since the 80s, with 3D ones appearing as an experiment of sorts. Tekken's roots lie within Virtua Fighter and a racing game. In 1992, Sega's programmer Yu Suzuki decided to create a fighting game that would accurately portray real martial arts in a video game form, but in 3D. In the early 90s, game developers didn't have the knowledge base we have now, nor did they have the hardware that could perform the task they required in seconds. Every new endeavor in 3D was an exploration, and Yu Suzuki and his team achieved almost impossible things, making for an authentic for the time 3D fighting game that would run on the then current arcade hardware. Not long after, Namco launched a test project aimed at testing the 3D character animation and rigging capabilities based on their Ridge Racer game. But Namco, like Sega, also had its arcade business, and they wanted to answer with their own fighting game. This test was going to evolve into something bigger, and with the help of the former Sega staff, including game designer Seiichi Ishii, Tekken was born. While it came out on hardware vastly superior to that of Sega, as it was based on PlayStation rather than the pre-existing arcade processors and chips from the 80s, it nevertheless followed in Virtua Fighter's footsteps of authentic martial art representation. As time passed, moves become more and more refined, motion capture almost came into play, and animations became fluid and precise. But with this, more and more fictional martial arts started to appear in the series, diluting its initial legacy somewhat. It was never critical, and some outstanding cases could be explained with factors like guest characters. But with the introduction of Victor in Tekken 8, we have an original character that made the cup overflow. He's as anime as it gets, with his teleport, cyber katana, and total disregard towards the series' roots of an experiment to one-up Virtua Fighter. And we don't want Tekken to abandon its identity. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel if you don't want to miss any of our fighting game content, and check out our Patreon, and also a huge thank you to our lovely supporters. Katsuhiro Harada is the longtime head honcho of the Tekken series. Love the man or hate him, you can't deny the man's dedication and passion towards his child. He's one of the game designers and producers, and we're talking across gaming as a whole, not only fighting games, who interacts with the community the most and has his fingers on the pulse of the latest trends, wishes, you know what not to do, or dissatisfactions. Oftentimes, he has very open and honest talks about the systems in place for his games, or the way he and his team implement various characters. For example, in his most recent question, he asked Native Americans who follow him on Twitter about their perception of Julia and Michelle, two indigenous characters that have been represented in the series. He was interested in the balance of having standout features that clearly hint at their heritage and not falling deep into the stereotype hole. And if you think about it, that's exactly the way Harada handles new Tekken characters. He's consistently emphasized the inclusion of characters from various backgrounds as one of his goals. Respect and relatability. Remember Azucena's reveal and Liu Kang's instant reaction to her. He was overjoyed after recognizing her as being Peruvian just from a glance. That's great work on the part of concept artists and designers, as she has some elements that allow people to parse a lot of information about her instantly. Someone like Julia, who is also instantly recognizable as Native American, but some have commented that her visual features are a bit more stereotypical and unrealistic in the modern day and age, especially for a girl in her 20s, like plumes, feathers, and amulets in her attire. The design of someone like Shaheen is also a dead giveaway of his heritage. But while it's somewhat exaggerated, it's not as clumsy as Julia's. Of course, it's not always possible to tie someone to their country of origin in a subtle yet recognizable manner. Sometimes Tekken requires characters to simply fill their role. You wouldn't be able to tell where Lydia or Lily are from without external information. But oftentimes characters are wholly represented by their martial arts style, which in turn ties them to their country of origin. You simply know Eddie is Brazilian because he's a capoeira master. King is a Mexican luchador, Hwarang is a Korean taekwondo prodigy, Fakam is a hulking force of nature from Thailand, the birthplace of Muay Thai, and Panda is Isla Rapoda Melanoloca. When you try to authentically represent people from various walks of life and backgrounds in your game, it stands to reason that you should also try to be as close as possible to a real portrayal of their martial arts as well. Take a look at Victor's style and try to guess what it is or try to discern anything about him from it. You can read a lot about the characters that don't practice any particular martial art. Miguel, for example, he's scrappy, hard-hitting, and rough. Victor, he's just anime bullshit in a suit with a katana. Hello? We talked more about Victor in our video about Tekken 8 newcomers. There will be a link to it down in the description. He could end up a popular character, a strong one, and a fun one to play, but that's besides the point. Characters like him, with lots of teleports, unreadable moves, and straight up fantasy stuff, their special moves dilute the overarching style of the character, leaving nothing but a shell and a name attached to it. As we mentioned, Tekken is a game that thrives on having characters defined by their martial arts, and authenticity is paramount for those characters. To be clear, we're not advocating for complete realism. That would be lunacy. Tekken is a game, first and foremost, and realism is welcome as long as it enhances the gameplay. We simply ask for a respectful approach in selecting characters' backstories and origins to be married with the same approach to representing their martial arts. To reiterate our point, we're not asking for the removal of all of the Victors, Devil Jins, and Yoshimitsus. First of all, Devil Jin plays an important role in the game, and everyone loves the quirky and weird nature of Yoshimitsu, and who knows what purpose Victor may serve. No, having some unorthodox characters is completely fine, doubly so when they're bosses. Did you play JRPGs when you were younger? Lots and lots of them deal with the themes of human nature triumphing over power that wants to control them, be it gods, supreme beings, aliens, or what have you. God slaying is rooted deep within the nature of both Japanese games and storytelling across different media. Weak, insignificant humans triumph over unfathomable power against all odds. Tell us you didn't feel like the best Tekken player in the world when you first beat Jinpachi in Tekken 5. The simple truth is that having more realistic characters adds impact to those who do have superpowers. Fighting the power will always be more satisfying than defeating those that are equal or weaker to you, even if it's just perceived as such, and the game balance numbers tell you that the characters are relatively the same power-wise. Perceived power is also power, even if it's only in your head. Bosses like True Ogre, Jinpachi, or Azazel are more than welcome. It allows mere mortals to demonstrate their prowess with their lowly, real martial arts against the overwhelmingly powerful and fantastical opponents. We don't want to turn this video into Victor bashing, but he's just a prime example of how not to do it. When we got Noctis, his abilities at least made sense in a way that he's not a Tekken character, and those feats are what he's capable of. And it's also true that Victor isn't the first to teleport around and use disappearance tricks. Raven, Kunimitsu, and even Yoshimitsu have all been noted for such tomfoolery. But in their cases, it doesn't discard their entire identity. Now, before you tell us that Tekken is a series with fighting logs of wood, kangaroos, raptors, and bears, keep in mind that all of them are accepted only because the rest of the game is steeped in realism. A famous writer, Robin Hobb, once said that if you're writing a book and you have a medieval army that's described as a medieval army, it sounds, smells, and looks like a medieval army, its soldiers are dressed in period-appropriate attire and talk like real soldiers, it's much easier to believe that the enemy on the hill in front of them is a dragon. The very same concept applies to Tekken. Contrary to what Twitter and Reddit want you to believe, competitive games aren't only balanced with top players in mind. Game developers usually look at various skill brackets before adjusting anything, so that the cases of noob stompers and unstoppable in the right hands are avoided. Pro players know the matchups, anticipate the mix-ups, and are aware of the options any given opponent has. They can react to some mind-boggling stuff. But when a new player tries Tekken out for the first time, they can see that the red-haired Korean they're constantly losing to just uses his legs very quickly, and if they block low, they can avoid being destroyed by that dancing Brazilian, but they simply cannot anticipate someone to disappear into the thin air only to fall down upon them from the skies. Those things are simply not within the same bracket. When there are expectations set by the game, it shouldn't simply go and throw them out of the window the very next moment. Visual clarity is extremely important. If you go down this rabbit hole, you will discover that everyone was dissatisfied with Akuma in Tekken 7 for this very reason. He broke the rules and subverted the expectations set by previous entries. We only accept some of the stuff in Tekken without any second thought just because we're already used to it. But it benefits no one if the definitions are stretched and the goalposts are constantly moved. Some people say they would love to see someone from Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat as guests in Tekken. But do they really? Are they truly sure they'd enjoy dodging fireballs, getting punished by DP out of nowhere, being dragged from across the screen, or animation canceled on all over again? Yeah, didn't think so. Tekken is no Virtua Fighter, but let's not forget that they share common roots. It would be a shame to stray too far from them. In the aforementioned video about the Tekken 8 newcomers, we also talked about Reina and her martial art of Taido, its origins, history, applications, and accuracy of representation. We concluded that it was very close to perfection, and this is thanks in no small part to Tetsuji Nakano, a 4-time Taido World Champion, whom Bandai Namco invited to collaborate with for this character. And this, of course, is not the first time when Harada's team worked together with martial arts masters. Tatsuya Naka helped make Lydia's moves authentic, and the capoeira master Marcelo Pereira helped bring Eddie Gordo to life. There is a lot of heart and passion being put into creating authentic displays of real martial arts so that someone can then go and exclaim, "Holy shit, I saw that in UFC," or "I've seen my sensei do that exact move." Something like this makes it easier for many people to connect to the characters they're playing as. Everyone in the FGC is aware that picking your main can be science, and it can also be a call of the heart. For someone like the writer of this video, whose country isn't represented in the series, picking someone like Jin or Lydia was a no-brainer because he always wanted to become a karateka, unsuccessfully mind you. Simply knowing that Lydia's moves are real and could be performed by trained professionals was inspiring. But with all due respect to every top-level martial artist, they cannot teleport or shoot fire. For someone who was drawn to fighting games because of martial arts first and foremost, even the simple knowledge that real people put tons of work to research, plan, motion capture, and implement these moves makes it easier to connect with one character over the other, which we know for a fact was just animated from scratch in Unreal. Tekken is the last bastion of 3D fighting games. Dead or Alive is too niche and has other priorities. Soul Calibur shot itself in the foot, Bloody Roar, Tabal, and Bushido Blade aren't coming back, and while there are some murmurs about Virtua Fighter, we have yet to see anything substantial. Tekken has always done things in its own particular way, mirroring Harada's convictions somewhat. And if Harada is as adamant as ever in fostering representation and diversity through the choices of who gets to be a character in Tekken, it'd be a shame if the games themselves stray from this and lose their identity. Let's leave Hadoukens to Street Fighter, get over here's to Mortal Kombat, and teleportations behind you to memes. P.S. Psh, nothing personal, kid. Let Tekken do what Tekken does best.